Prepare to be illuminated.
Hi guys, in this video we're going to be reviewing the cards from the Chaos deck in Horus Heresy Legions. The Chaos deck as a neutral deck is by design weaker than the Space Marine deck, but just like the Imperial Army deck, it contains many cards which can be very strong. So let's start by going through the deck, beginning with the Warlords. So the Chaos Warlords, there are two of them. They both actually have 40 health as opposed to the Imperial Warlords who had 30 health. The first one is called Ingathel, so she's Ingathel the Ascended. And although initially she looks superbly strong, to attack, 40 health, special ability, she is actually one of the worst warlords in the game. Experienced players refer to her as Meme Gathel because actually being able to put together a winning deck with her is a bit of a meme. If you beat anyone with Ingathel, you've actually humiliated them and you get bragging rights. She is really hard to play with because she's too random. And also she doesn't have access to the best units and tactics. Well, the consistent set of best units and tactics, because she can't access Space Marine decks. So let's take a look at her. Her special ability is that she reduces maintenance of friendly demons by 2. That itself is actually not a bad passive ability to have. Demon units can be very powerful, but to compensate for that, they reduce your available energy by a certain amount, which is called maintenance, and Ingathel can support more demons than any other warlord. But her real problem comes with her special ability. For 2 energy, she can give a Mark of Chaos to a non-demon troop. The Marks of Chaos are the unique thing with the Chaos faction, and they show up in some Space Marine decks. There are 4 Marks of Chaos you can have: the Mark of Khorne, Mark of Slaanesh, Mark of Nurgle, and Mark of Tzeentch. The Mark of Khorne is a straight up offensive thing. It's one of the best marks to get. It'll give a unit +3 on its attack, so it becomes very damaging. The Mark of Slaanesh is also excellent. It gives a unit sneak attack, so whenever it attacks, it doesn't take any return damage. Mark of Nurgle gives a unit poison, so after it damages an enemy troop, that troop will die at the end of the troop's next turn, with very few things being able to stop that. And the last one is the Mark of Tzeentch, which will make a unit invisible until it takes an action, or rather until it attacks. It can still use its special actions while it's invisible. It also gives it wings, meaning it gains unstoppable, and frontline units have no impact on that, so it can always attack whoever it wants as long as the target's not stealth. So those are the 4 marks. Now the problem is Ingathel gives a random mark. You don't get to choose what the unit gets. So although you may give your unit the exact right mark for the situation, often you'll get the wrong mark, and it's 2 energy, which is kind of being wasted because the unit will die soon. So her ability is really designed to turn her people into demons, because once a unit has 4 marks of chaos, it becomes a powerful greater demon. But those units are going to become prime targets while they're building up for the enemy to take out, and so it's kind of hard to actually achieve that. So because of her randomness, she just cannot reliably do a special effect. Even though she's got 40 health, she tends to die quickly. She has trouble dealing with enemy troops. So we're going to put her away for now and bring up the legendary warlord for Chaos, Captured Mandragorax. I actually like this. It's not an easy warlord to play as, especially on high Terra, but it actually does a pretty good job early on in the ladder. And experienced players who have a little bit of luck can also make Captured Mandragorax work at the top end. Mostly because although it's the units and tactics it gets access to may not be the best, its ability is excellent. It can potentially deal out 4 damage a turn, split between 2 targets. If there's only 1 target available, it'll just do 2 damage to that 1 target only. But its ability is fantastic and can mess with other people's plans, but you have to be very skillful in how you play it. Later on, I'll post a video of a Captured Mandragorax deck in action. Alright, so those are the 2 warlords. Now let's go and get into the cards themselves. Escape Vent is a card which is actually pretty popular. It costs no energy to play, and it gives stealth to any friendly infantry or Astartes troop until your next turn. That's great because it basically makes a troop very hard to damage until it can actually act, so it's a popular card in many decks. Wounded Zealot, this is a card which, although it's free, it takes up room in your deck. So if you put one of these in, yes, you can play it at any time, regardless of whether or not you have energy, but just like with the Imperial, I can't remember what it was, something Populist card, this is a bit of a waste of space in your deck. There's, again, very few decks which will actually carry this, and that's usually just because they get some benefit from either deploying troops or having troops die. So in general, you should not have Wounded Zealot. Abisha is an interesting card. It has an incredibly high attack for a 1 energy unit, but it only has 1 health, so it dies easily. On the other hand, it only costs 1 energy to put out there, and it becomes a priority for the enemy to kill. So although it looks like an aggressive card, quite often playing an Abisha can be a defensive move. Its Berserk ability just means it must attack every turn if it can. So this card is actually not that bad. Don't play it expecting it to actually survive an attack. Play it expecting it to buy you some time and be a high priority target for the enemy to either waste a unit's attack on or waste energy and a tactic card on. Cabalist, this guy is useless. Do not put him in. If you need a unit for 1 energy, use Abisha instead. Really, there's nothing that Cabalist has which Abisha cannot do. Nurglings, these guys are kind of nice. In fact, Nurglings are probably the single best 1 energy unit in the game, because Nurglings do not die. Whenever they get killed, they go back into your hand. If you play a Horus deck and you're trying to turn your Horus into his demon form, Nurglings are considered to be pretty essential to that, because they're a cheap unit you can keep, a cheap chaos unit you can keep playing over and over until Horus becomes a demon. The only downside to Nurglings is they have maintenance 1, so for every Nurgling you have deployed, you've got 1 less available energy at the start of your turn. Swarm of Flies is the other cheap demon. Although it has more attack than Nurglings, it's considered to be inferior because it's a bit of a waste of space in your deck, because it gets killed easily, it doesn't do that much damage, and while it's out, you're suffering the maintenance costs, so you've got 1 less available energy. So generally you do not want to have Swarm of Flies. You don't really see it in competitive decks at all. Taint of Chaos is an interesting tactic. It gives a Mark of Chaos to a non-demon troop. You'll often see players early on in the game at the bottom end of the ladder trying to use this a lot. Experienced players tend to give up on using this because it's a 1 energy card which gives a random ability, and so you can't depend on it to do things. And in general, you want your deck to be dependable. So I actually do not recommend using Taint of Chaos. The one exception is if you're running an Ingathel deck and you're trying to turn your units into demons as quickly as possible, Taint of Chaos can help with that. Next up is Fire Cultists. These are basically an upgraded version of Abisha. They get used again in some decks. Again, primarily I would say use it as a defensive unit because although it doesn't have front line, with a high attack value like that, your enemy will treat it as a frontline unit. They will prioritize killing this so that it does not survive round to its next turn. And again, killing it is either going to use up a unit's attack or it's going to use up energy and or a tactic card. So it's not a bad card, even though it will die quickly. It just effectively serves as a frontline unit. Horus Cultist. This is very popular with Horus decks because Horus gets to use Taint of Chaos cards as part of his triggering of his demon ability, because it counts as a Chaos card. These are pretty decent, again, especially if you're trying to collect Taints of Chaos. For Chaos, yeah, this is a pretty solid Chaos card. I can't really say much about that. It's 2 energy, it's likely to survive more than 1 turn with 3 health, and it does very average damage, and it gives you a bonus card in your hand. Yeah, I'd say keep it. Righteous Zealot, this one's a bit of mixed. Its stats are nothing special. When it dies, you get a Wounded Zealot, that 0 energy card we saw earlier. This can be okay as a result. Although this unit will die in 1 turn, it'll help you put out at least 1 more point of damage the following turn. Again, in decks where you need people to die or you need to be deploying cheap people, this one can work out nicely in there. but in most of the time you probably don't want this, because for 2 energy there are some stronger units out there. Speaking of better cards for 2 energy, actually, Seek and Destroy is one of the top cards in the game. You'll see this being used all the way up to the top of the ladder. It's a tactic. You spend 2 energy to use it, and you can deal 3 damage to enemy units. Not to the enemy warlord, but to the enemy unit. Especially in early game, where 3 health is the average, this is a card that lets you quickly avoid the enemy taking full board control. It's a fantastic card to include. Try and make sure you build your collection up to 2 of these as soon as possible. Shawashin. I hope I said that right. This is a card which is generally not that great. Again, the exception is in a deck where you're trying to turn your people into demons. This is pretty much what she exists for. Spend 1 energy and gain a Mark of Chaos. If you're lucky, the first Mark of Chaos she gets would be a Mark of Tzinch, and then she can safely build up in stealth mode and become a demon. Otherwise, your enemy will be trying to kill her as quickly as possible. The other way you might luck out is she might get a Mark of Khorne, which turns her into a pretty respectable unit with 4 attack and 3 health. So, if she was more reliable, she'd be a great card. Right now, she's below average just because you don't know what Mark of Chaos she's getting. If she survives till 4 marks, she does become a greater demon, which can be excellent for you. Breach. This is fantastic. Lots of people will be relying on frontline cards to protect them, often quite strong frontline units with high amounts of health. Breach will rip them apart. This card gets used all the way to the top of the ladder, and even if the enemy doesn't have front line, it's not bad. It lets you spend 3 energy and do 2 damage to any unit of your choice. So often people will have Breach in their deck. They may not use it through most of the game, and because they're holding out for the enemy to play a unit with front line, and maybe that never shows up, and then at the end of the game they can use Breach as part of their finishing combo to kill the enemy warlord. So this one gets a nice thumbs up. Evelyn. This is the pretty much average Chaos Infantry. It does go into many Chaos decks, goes into many Horus decks. It's a card with completely respectable stats for its energy cost. 3 energy, has 3 attack, 3 defense, and its backlash ability can be useful as well. Like, it's just a nice little bonus to give to a non-demon troop. So it goes on vehicles, goes on infantry, goes on space marines. So it's a good card. Most of the time, if you have an Evelyn and you have other units, your enemy will try to kill the other units before killing Evelyn, so that no one exists to collect that Mark of Chaos. Mornin. So this guy looks like he's fantastic. Look at that. For 3 energy, you get a unit with 4 attack. The problem is, with only 2 health, he's really easy to kill. Fire Cultists cost 1 energy. They have the same attack, and they're pretty much almost as likely to survive until the next turn. So these guys do not get used. If you want someone with 4 attack early in the game, go with Fire Cultists instead. Screamers as well suffer from the exact same problem. Screamers look incredible. They're cheap. They've got this amazing attack. They have sneak attack so that they don't take any damage when they're attacking. But with 2 health, just about anything will kill them as soon as they hit the board. So Screamers, really not worth it. They take up room in your deck and they'll die before they get to do good stuff. So let's put them away. The Brotherhood. This card gets used predominantly with Horus as well as with other decks which are trying to build up to collect demons, because every turn these guys survive until the beginning of your next turn, you get to add a Taint of Chaos to your hand. So with 3 health, they've got a pretty decent chance of surviving. Again, because of that known ability of theirs, people will try to kill them quickly, but with 3 health, there's a chance that the enemy won't be able to find a way to kill them, and they'll survive and give you that Taint of Chaos. So these guys are not terrible, they're average. The Trap. So this card used to be really popular until people realized that you can just, if the enemy plays the Trap, just play your worst unit and get rid of the Trap as a result. So what happens with the Trap is, it has an amazing health value, a very low attack value, so generally it's going to survive most of the time till its ability gets triggered, and the first enemy unit to get played will take 6 damage, and then the trap will also take 6 damage and it'll die. Salamander's decks tend to get some interesting use for the traps, because the Salamander's Warlord, Artela Numion, he well, actually no, he can't give this survivor because this is a structure, but the Chaplain Xavier from the Salamanders can give trap survivor, so that it can actually act twice. And the Salamanders also have a card which doubles a unit's health, so you can double the trap's health and then it'll act twice as well. So it can be useful under certain conditions. It's not terrible as you work your way up the ladder, but you're rarely going to find the trap in very top level decks. Warrior Lodge. This card looks like it could be amazing, but the problem is that it's extremely situational. You don't know for sure if you're going to have troops surviving on the board with marks of chaos. So this card, I've actually never seen this card be played as a result, because you just don't know if the right circumstance will come up. Potentially you could use it to set up a combo, like play a unit which gets Mark of Chaos and then play Warrior Lodge, but that's a very high energy cost to pull that combo off, and you might be better suited just playing an expensive unit instead. Alright, Artillery Strike. This is a really good card. This came with the Isfan expansion. This card is doing 2 damage, so everyone who gets hit by it takes 2 damage. It does get applied to only 3 targets. If there's less than 3, then however many targets there are will take only 2 damage each. It's not as though it gets focused. So this is typically saved up for a time when there's 3 enemies on the board, the Warlord and 2 units, and then you get to drop this and definitely do 2 damage to them. It has another buddy we'll see later on called Satellite Strike, which hits everybody, and it does up to 4 damage, but that means it might do 1 damage to people. Some people it might do 4 damage to people who when they don't need that much, and so on. Artillery Strike is quite popular because it's a reliable 2 damage. You know what you're getting. The only thing you don't know is exactly who's going to get hit if there's more than 3 enemies out there. Battle Flies. So this is the first of the, I guess, more expensive lesser demons we see. It's an alright card. For 4 energy, its attack value is really low, but it does have poisonous, so any unit which it attacks will die at the end of that unit's next turn. Most of the time, though, when you see battle flies being used, they're being created by some other ability. For 4 energy, there are other units and cards which might be a better investment than battle flies. Again, you're spending 4 energy and getting a unit which will only do 2 damage to an enemy. If that enemy survives, can still attack during its next turn, and then the enemy unit will die. So these guys are a little underwhelming. Embers of Isfan 3. This is the Chaos Structure. This card, it does get used sometimes. It's a useful ability. Probably the biggest downside to this one is that it costs 4 energy, and it can only give a Mark of Chaos to a single non-demon troop per turn. By contrast, the Emperor's Children deck has a card which I believe costs 3 energy, has the same stats, and it gives a Mark of Chaos to every single troop which gets deployed, well, every single non-demon troop which gets deployed. So there's no turn limit to that, and it's basically superior in every way, almost every way, to Embers of Isfan 3. The only thing Embers can do is repeatedly stack Mark of Chaos on a unit, but it's an expensive card for 4 energy. It's kind of limited on who it can impact. It's not that popular. I'd say this is sub-average, below average. Lutgard's Cultists, these guys are okay. They've got an amazing attack value. Coming in at 4 energy with just 3 health though, they're going to be a top priority to get killed. As a result, you could play them defensively, but they tend to die a little bit early, so I don't like them in general. Possess. This is a card which looks amazing. Like you play this on an enemy unit, and then every turn at the start of its turn, it's going to deal 2 damage to the units to its left and its right. It's just that there's few units who it's worth doing this to for a cost of 4 energy. Often for 4 energy you can deploy a unit which will have more impact or use a great tactic. people are still theory crafting effective ways to use Possess. Some people think it could go well in the Alpha Legion deck, for example, but for now, I think that unless you know exactly how you want to use Possess, don't put it in your deck hoping a good situation will pop up, because it probably won't. Priests of Thoros. These guys are not bad for Ingathel. They're actually probably harming others, because those random lesser demons you summon, they're going to have a maintenance impact, which means in the following turn you won't be able to play as powerful units yourself. So I think unless you're going with Ingathel, you probably want to skip out on Priests of Thoros. Also, these days, because of Raven Guard, a lot of decks include cards which negate stealth, so these guys will often not survive long enough to use their ability. On the other hand, if they do survive till the next turn, because they cost 4 energy to play, the earliest you'll play this is in your 4 energy turn, and the following turn you can immediately summon a random lesser demon, and the advantage of summoning a unit into play is that you're not losing anything from your hand, so you'll continue to have options in future turns. The other downside, though, is it is a random lesser demon. You don't know if you're getting a great demon or a poor demon. So you don't know if you're getting, say, battle flies, or if you're getting something great like demonettes, which we'll see in a moment. Alright, next up, Tancred. This guy is kind of underwhelming. He can repeatedly put into play a bunch of weak units, but those bunch of weak units are going to get murdered by strong units later on. Tancred is really rarely used, perhaps only in Ferrous Manist Iron Hands decks, where he just needs to generate cheap units to die in order to trigger his Reckoning ability. I would say in general, Tancred is not something you want to go for, so leave it out of your deck, save the space. Tilath's Changers. These are a lesser demon, and these are extremely popular. You'll often see what are called Fulgrim Tilath decks, or frankly many other Emperor's Children Tilath decks, because if you manage to put out 1 or 2 Tilath Changers and then play a bunch of cheap cards out of your hand, you will do a lot of damage. So this is actually a pretty great card. It's going to be a priority for the enemy to kill, but with 5 health they don't go down easy, and with 3 attack they will work hard on taking down whoever's attacking them. So this is generally a pretty good card. Don't worry about that maintenance 2 factor. Yes, you'll have less energy during your next turn, but these guys will not live for long, because they're going to be a top priority for the enemy to kill. So try and get your mileage out of them before they die. This is probably one of the best lesser demons in the game. Or frankly, even among the greater demons, this is a great card. Defense Satellites. This is super popular. Most decks will have either Defense Satellites or Artillery Strike, or even both in there. Because they damage everyone, they can also hit targets who have stealth. So Defense Satellites and Artillery Strikes are one of the main ways that people react to stealth decks with. So yes, this card is great. I strongly recommend including it in your deck, as I do with Artillery Strike. Darius Rhino. This has really poor stats for its energy cost. It costs 5 energy but only does 3 attack and 3 defense. Even its special ability is pretty terrible. It puts in play 3 very weak units. The only deck where you really would see this getting used is a Ferrous Manist deck, because he needs people to die on his side. Apart from that, Darius Rhino should not be used. Ichiron. So this is a card typically seen in Chaos decks because they tend to use lots of demons, but if you have any other factions deck and you're planning on creating demons, this could be worth having. For 5 energy, his stats are pretty nice. I mean, honestly, he's worth playing for those stats alone. And his impact on demons can be pretty great if you have demons around. Reldred. This is a pretty solid Chaos Infantry card. Again, though, for non-Chaos decks, there's usually better infantry to play for 5 energy. These guys have 4 attack, 4 defense. When they rally, they gain a Mark of Chaos. So most of the time, that's going to mean they get a useful ability, because 75% of the time they will either get Mark of Corn, which gives them 7 attack, Or they get Mark of Slaanesh, which turns them into a unit which can do 4 damage and take nothing in return. Or they get a Mark of Tzeentch, which turns them into a unit who's almost certainly going to survive until its next turn when it can attack. Or they get Mark of Nurgle, which basically is for them probably the worst, but it does mean any unit which attacks them and survives will die at the end of that turn. Or anyone who they attack will die at the end of its next turn. So they're pretty okay. Their stats are their stats are poor for the energy cost, but the ability kind of compensates. It's just that, again, it's a random mark. You don't know what you're getting, whereas there's other cards for 5 energy where you know exactly what you're getting. Like, compare these guys, 5 energy with 4/4, with this guy, 5 energy, 5/5. So, as a result, they're not that super popular. Horus decks will often include them just in the hope that they get Mark of Khorne or Mark of Slaanesh. Sirek is probably the most popular Chaos Infantry. He's got 5 energy, 5 health, 4 attack, so it's okay. His stats are slightly subpar for 5 energy, but his backlash ability is great. He adds a free lesser demon to your hand who becomes relatively cheap to deploy. So it's a card generating unit, and it generates a card which is discounted, so it's worth it, especially in a Horus deck where you're trying to convert into your if you're trying to trigger Horus's Whisper of Chaos. Kenric, this guy's actually not bad. He costs 6 energy. He's got 6 health, which is okay for 6 energy, 5 attack, which is a little below par for 6 energy, but you can spend 1 energy, you can destroy a friendly infantry, so typically that's going to be a unit which is badly injured, whatever. Or if you're facing Alpha Legion, you could destroy units which the Alpha Legion player is giving secret orders to, and then you can summon a random lesser demon out of that. And lesser demons, by the way, cannot be given secret orders. So Kenric's not a bad card, it's just he's on the expensive side. When I do my deck building guide, you'll see why you probably don't want to have too many cards which cost 6 energy. Alright, Medale is a demon. This guy gets seen relatively uncommonly, except in Ingathel decks, because his, again, for stats wise, he's okay for 6 energy. He's got a tiny maintenance cost, so that's actually quite negligible. His ability kind of sucks. When a friendly infantry dies, you get a Taint of Chaos. So in my personal experience playing with Medale, a lot of the times while he's on the board, I don't have other infantry surviving, so I don't really get to benefit from his Taint of Chaos. Maybe that's just me being a bad Chaos player, but I don't like Medale, although his stats are decent for his energy cost. Tilath, this guy is very interesting. At the end of the turn, add a random tactic to your hand. So this is a random tactic out of all of the tactics in the game. So even if you're not a Space Marine Legion, you might get a Space Marine tactic. Or you might be playing Sons of Horus, but you're going to get an Iron Hands tactic, or a Salamanders, or Emperor's Children tactic. And the tactic can be of any cost. You might get the smallest, weakest tactic, or you may get an expensive, game-changing tactic. So that's pretty cool, but the other thing is, for his energy cost, his stats are pretty nice as well. 6 attack, 7 health. So you can either use him as an offensive unit or a combat unit, or you use him for his, you try to save him, keep him alive, and use him for his ability over there. Either way, he's pretty flexible. He's not a bad unit to include. He's not the best of the demons, I'll go on to that in a moment, but he's solid. Abyssa looks incredible. Whenever you kill a unit with Abyssa, you get a free copy of that unit. The only problem is Abyssa generally needs to survive for the battle honor to trigger. And that basically means that most of the time you're picking on weak units and you're getting a copy of the enemy's weaker units. So I've occasionally used Abyssa. It's an okay card to have. Its stats are, I guess, alright for 7 energy. But again, you don't. Yeah, I include it if you've got nothing better, but at some point you'll want to include better cards for 7 energy than Abyssa. Barge of the Damned. So This card, you have to read it very carefully before you decide if you want to include it in your deck or not. So it says, put into play a copy of up to 3 Chaos Infantry troops who died in this game. So it's only troops who are listed as infantry, not Astartes or not structures or vehicles. And it doesn't put into play multiple copies of the same guy. So you have to have had at least 3 Chaos Infantry casualties in the match to benefit from this. And often, because you're going to have a lot of cheap Chaos Infantry, you're going to play this card for 7 energy and just a bunch of cheap guys will come back. So it can be great if used right, because you might get the units you need to make a big difference, but you might not get what you really want. So be careful with Barge of the Damned. Bile Hell Cannon is the first of the Chaos vehicles. You don't see this at all, because for 7 energy, its ability is really underwhelming. It deals only 3 damage to a unit and it poisons it. That sounds great, except that unit now knows that it's dying, and the player will use it up. Like, if it's a unit with high damage, it's going to go straight into your Warlord that turn. So poison is a bit of a weak mechanic right now, and Bile Cannon suffers for being a poison vehicle, so ignore this one. Sophepoke. This one is very similar to the previous demon which we saw. So this guy though has a higher maintenance cost. He costs 7 energy as well. He's got 7 attack, 8 health, but he adds a random tactic to your hand, but then he can do nothing else. But then the next tactic you play costs 0, so he gives you a tactic and you can play it for free. And it can be any tactic, so it could be some of the most powerful ones in the game and you get to play it for free, or it might be a garbage tactic. So an example of a garbage tactic is maybe in your deck you don't have any stealth units at all, but he might generate the Raven Guard the Raven Guard tactic card, which means draw units from your deck. Anything with stealth gains +1 attack and health. So it's unreliable, but can be very powerful, much like a lot to do with Chaos. Alright. Next up is Nogahil. This is the next Chaos vehicle. This one's actually better. If you're really using a lot of vehicles, this can be okay. Its only downside is the cost for its ability is a little bit high. 3 energy to deal 6 damage, although it can be applied to anyone. It also has a Battle Honor ability. If it kills a unit by attacking directly, not through using its ability, you gain a Taint of Chaos. In general, Nogahil's too valuable to risk in direct attacks. You want to preserve its health for as long as possible. So if you have it deployed, you're using it for that 3 energy ability and doing 6 damage to targets of your choice. Okay, now this is my one of my favorite cards out of the Chaos deck. It's a Slaanesh Greater Demon, Urea the Seducer. This card will wreck aggressive warlords like Angron and Sevatar and Kharn, because the enemy warlord will have 0 attack while this guy's alive, meaning everyone can hit the enemy warlord and take no damage at all. So this is great for that reason alone. You'll see it a lot in Terra, where there's a lot of people who play Angron, and this is the hard counter. Although Angron does get access to cards which will destroy all units, including Rhea, but enjoy it while you can. So this card is one of the best Chaos cards, so definitely worth it. Father Decay is used really uncommonly. Again, a big problem is it's a random troop. You might spend 2 energy and you'll put in play a troop which costs 1 energy. Or you'll put in play a pretty useless troop. So this card generally doesn't get used much. It also has a huge energy cost 9, and in terms of damage he does relatively little for that, only 6 damage. So leave him out of your deck. Slayer of Worlds is interesting. This looks crazy, like 15 energy, how do you play that? But look at that special text. When this troop dies, reduce its cards cost by 1. This, although you sometimes see this in cards, in decks at high level, in general, a lot of people feel there's too much removal. There are too many removal cards out there. which will immediately destroy a unit, to risk things too much on a single high ticket unit like this. Having said that, if you can drop it and make it survive for a turn and the enemy has no frontline units, it'll win you a match. But on the other hand, with maintenance 7, you can barely play any other units at all while your Slayer of Worlds is deployed. What that means, and I've done this before, is when I see a Slayer of Worlds, I try to keep it stunned through units, through cards, through abilities, and if you do that, the enemy player is crippled because he won't have enough energy to play much else apart from the Slayer of Worlds. So it can be a double-edged sword. Personally, I never use this guy. Alright, the final 3 Chaos cards are cards that you cannot include in your deck. Oh wait, I missed one. Pax Chaotica. This is a fantastic tactic card. It has a huge energy cost 9, but it creates 3 random lesser demons. If you're lucky, it'll be 3 of these really powerful guys at the bottom, and they'll win you the match. So let's go over these guys. The first is Terror Hounds. So this is, despite being like Hounds and you think they're aggressive or whatever, they're actually a defensive unit. They have front lines. Enemies must attack them before attacking anyone else, and with 5 attack value of their own, they're going to savage anyone who attacks them. But they do have Berserk, meaning during their turn they will attack and then most likely die. So watch out for that. They'll defend you for 1 turn only. Seducers are fantastic. They've got 5 attack and they've got 4 health, but they also have fast, which means on the turn that Seducers goes into play, they can attack immediately and most likely kill something. And if they survive that initial attack and killing, they gain stealth, which means that they'll be invisible and hard to counterattack. So these guys are really good. Often if you play Pax Chaotica and you're lucky enough to get 2 or 3 Seducers generated, that can win you the game, because that's 15 damage you can immediately throw out to people. And the final one is Ravagers of Khorne. So these guys are pretty good because every time they take damage, they gain +2 attack. And they have a lot of health, so they can take a lot of damage. So this can stack up pretty fast as well and be a great way of inflicting a lot of pain on the enemy. Alright, so this covers the Chaos deck. I hope you found it neutral. Next up, I'll be moving on and doing the Mechanicus deck, and that video should come tomorrow or in a couple of days. So I hope you guys found this useful. Please remember to subscribe, and that way you get notified whenever the next video goes up. Alright, so thanks for watching, and hope to see you in battle in Horus Heresy Legions.